I Don't Know Yet is not affiliated with any specific 12-step fellowship. The content put forth are the thoughts, opinions, and experiences of the host and guests. It is meant to be suggestive only and is in no way a reflection on how to work the steps in any fellowship or how to work any other recovery program. Okay, guys, we are back. Today I have Alex back with me. Thanks for coming back in.
You're very welcome.
I'm very excited for this episode.
Yeah,
very excited. So today we're going to talk about misconceptions in the rooms, misconceptions of just things that we hear, different steps and that stuff. I know for myself, I put myself in a position, unknowingly, of course, of maybe struggling when I didn't need to because of things that I heard that I didn't kind of fact check first. So I'm really looking forward to bringing to light some of these things that are heard quite often.
I think it'll be. I think it'll prove useful.
I think it's going to be good. So, my idea for the episode was just kind of to go through and talk just quickly about each step and see if there is anything that kind of comes up for us. And then there's a couple of like trademark things afterwards that we can talk about as well. So, let's talk step one. What are some misconceptions that we hear in the rooms about step one?
Well, in the conversation we were just having before we started, the idea of where does step one occur and what really is step one. You had brought up the idea that step one happens before you get here. And I don't know that's entirely true.
Okay.
Two people who were very influential on me in my recovery that I actually never got to meet were guys Mark Houston and Joe Hawk. And they were two guys that spoke a lot and had some really cool experience and stories and whatnot. And they were involved in some of the Fellowship of the Spirit weekends, and they did a lot of that kind of stuff. And I listened to a lot of that when I was fairly new in recovery. And I remember Joe talking about step zero and the concept of step zero being the time spent eliminating all other alternatives until you get down to the two that are written in the big book, which are dying an alcoholic death or living on a spiritual basis.
Mm-hmm.
You know, and I think we can all go through our experience and look at times when, you know, it was, well, I die an alcoholic death, live on a spiritual basis, or change my environment.
Right.
Or, blah, you know, different job, money, relationship, like whatever. All these kinds of things. All these alternatives to the two real alternatives that the alcoholic or drug addict has. And so I would say that step zero does occur outside before we get here, ideally. Or, well, for many people, step zero, you know, I mean, you meet the people who've been in and out and in and out and in and out and in and out. They're working on step zero.
Yeah.
They're working on eliminating all of their alternatives. They sit down, maybe they read some of what's in the big book, they listen to some things in meetings, and they go, yeah, that, you know, it kind of sounds like me, but.
Yeah.
And there's some other alternative that they have in their mind. And it's only when all of those alternatives are eliminated, for me at least, I can't speak for anyone else, but for me it wasn't until all other alternatives were eliminated that I was willing to do anything.
Being beaten to a point of reasonableness.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And then at which point, you know, step one is really just a series of considerations. It's a series of ideas that we compare to our experience. You know, I look at, is this me? And in order to do that, I need the information. Because for me, I didn't know what it was to be an alcoholic or a drug addict.
Yeah.
I didn't understand the specific details. And so I can have all the experience in the world. I can be completely done step zero. I have no other alternatives. But until I'm presented with, this is what the problem is. Here is a very clear description of the problem. Then I'm able to compare that to my experience, and I can determine, is this me?
Right.
Yeah. Yeah.
Which I find the doctor's opinion is very helpful for that as well.
The doctor's opinion, Bill's story, more about alcoholism, everything up to page 44.
You know what's funny? I remember being in treatment, and I was trying to read the book. And I read probably the first 40 or 50 pages. Didn't understand any of it. The only thing I ever understood, and that helped me wrap my brain around what was happening until someone explained the doctor's opinion to me, was the jaywalker.
Mm-hmm.
The jaywalker story just
Yep.
makes so much sense. And it's funny because, like, whenever I share that with people that don't suffer from our disease, they're like, that makes no sense. I'm like, it does.
It does if you
It
have
really
that
does.
experience.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm like, that's literally what we do all of the time.
Yes.
So something that just popped in my head that I wanted to ask you about, talking about step 0.
Mm-hmm.
I have heard the bedevilments being referred to as the step 0 promises.
Yep.
Is
Yep.
that in line?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, that is the state that I lived in. The bedevilments is a description of how I living on my own power. That's like when I go through step 1 with someone, we go in and we read the bedevilments, and I like to do a comparison. It's fun because it illustrates the idea. Many people come in thinking drugs or alcohol is my problem.
Mm-hmm.
And outwardly, people will say that to us. People observe the problems that are created in our lives by whatever our drug of no choice is.
Mm-hmm.
But I sit down and I like to go through those questions with people. And I like kind of like a mental visualization comparison exercise. Like, I want you to go back to a certain time in your life. I want you to mentally transport yourself back there. And then I go in and it's like, hey, you are about to go and drink or go and get high. And we go through that description, having trouble with personal relationships. 3 hours before I took a drink, I was probably ready to kill someone. Just anyone, for no reason, or for something really trivial, like you looked at me the wrong way, or you didn't drive correctly, or whatever.
Yep.
Some sort of thing was amiss in my realm, and I didn't appreciate it.
Okay.
And you go through all those things, and it's like, I am in that. I feel useless. I'm full of fear. I'm miserable. All of these things, and inevitably, they'll go through this experience and be like, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that is how I experienced life. And then I would, again, from my experience, it's like, okay, now we're going to fast forward. You just had 3 drinks because alcohol was my drug of no choice. But compare it to your own experience, So I've just had 3 drinks. Am I a prey to misery and depression? No. Everything's fine. Perfect. The world is perfect. Am I having trouble with personal relationships? I am everyone's friend. We are so cool. I'm cool. The world's cool. Everything's perfect. Am I full of fear? None at all. None. Do I feel useless? Absolutely not. I'm pretty sure I'm not doing anything with my life, but I'm pretty sure I'm going to change the world.
Right. And you feel great.
And everything is perfect, and I am right here, right now. And I love that exercise because it demonstrates so clearly that, alcohol, drugs, they're not my problem. They're my solution. And it's that kind of thing that I think a lot of people, when they get here, they don't understand. Certainly people who are not like us definitely don't understand that. And I've had to go through this with people that I know. I had some family members that were dealing with another family member who had a serious problem, I believe is one of us. And I went through that with them, and I said, here's why. If you look at this person and tell them to just stop, that's not going to register. And I'm like, look at it like this. And they were like, wow, like I had not considered, all I see is what this is doing to this person, but I'm incapable of seeing what it's doing for this person.
Right.
And yeah, step 0 promises. Yeah, but I mean, that's how you live. That's how we live as we're eliminating all the alternatives.
Right. I love that.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
I'm here for it.
Fuck yeah.
Okay, I'm excited for this one because this is one of the first things you said you wanted to talk about. Step 2, misconceptions.
Oh, wow.
Here we go.
Actually, can you slide your book
I
over?
sure can.
'Cause
Buckle up, folks. Here we go.
I left my book in my car, which is a dangerous choice.
It's still with you.
It is. It is. I love going through step 2 with people because the concept of a higher power is such a radical but also simple concept.
Mm-hmm.
And I now when I go through this versus what I was taught at times and all of this kind of thing, one of my favorite things is on page 46. I had originally written in my big book, and I see you have it written here. It says, write down what I want God to be. And I think this is an interesting concept, but it's one that I have abandoned. And I'll explain why. For one, what I want God to be is inevitably going to be massively limited. Because my mind, my conception of the world and of things and God is inevitably limited. What I do with that is I have people write down 2 things that God isn't.
Okay.
And because I don't know what God is. I mean, I've done psychedelics and whatnot. I've never been able to wrap my head around the infinite. It's inconceivable.
It is.
And inevitably, any idea I assign to it is going to be reflective of myself and my own ideas and prejudices and limitations. But what God isn't is really important. The first thing that I'm pretty certain that God is not Santa Claus.
Tell me more.
And I see this as a conceptual problem for many people.
Okay.
And I ran into this myself. This was one of my initial, limitations. I'll tell a story. When I was about 4 months sober, I had a roommate from boarding school. He was a great dude. And he gets in a car accident. And he's thrown out of the car. The other 2 burn up in the car. And he is thrown into a tree.
Holy.
And he was a great dude. And he was loved by all. And so he's in the hospital. He's in a coma. Outlook's not very good here. And so I go to see him in the hospital. And I'm 4 months sober. So I'm praying. This is the first really big thing like this that's happened. So I'm praying that he's okay. Praying that he lives and that he's okay.
Mm-hmm.
He was not okay. He was
thrown from a car and in a coma.
Inevitably going to die. And so they had to pull the plug on him and he died.
Right.
And so I have just prayed for this thing and I didn't get it. Naturally, I am upset. And, when you're new and you're upset, what do? But you go and bitch to your sponsor about how you didn't get your way,
Because you were still praying for self.
Well, because it wasn't so much that I was praying for self.
You wanted to control the outcome and you wanted to get what you wanted.
Yeah, I wanted what I wanted.
Yeah.
And I had this Santa Claus-like magical belief in the idea of God that if I prayed for something, that's how it should be. And that if how I think things should be does not come to be, that is somehow reflective of me or God or whatever, because in this case, this is a simple reflection of the circumstances, black ice, nasty turn, cars, no seatbelt, and tree. Away she goes.
Yeah.
But if I have this idea that I am to pray for things and then to expect them, a la a Christmas list, I'm inevitably just setting myself up for the moment I don't get what I want. And then I can go and say, oh, see?
There is no God.
There is no God, or
Yeah.
God's blah, 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 blah.
I love that.
whatever. And that's just not the way it is. You know, and I learned that lesson early in that what I need to pray for, I need to pray to align my will with whatever is in store, whatever may be. You know, I could call it God's will,
Right.
but I have no idea what God's will is. When things happen in the world, I don't know why they happen or whether they mean something or not. You know, some people will say that everything happens for a reason, and maybe I don't know, sometimes I can be a bit of a shit disturber, and I like to say, and sometimes that reason is you're an idiot and you do stupid things.
Yeah.
You know, because
Your
some
actions matter.
exactly, you know,
Right.
I can, yeah. It's like, well, you know, I won't go into the many examples from my
For
life of
sure.
things I could say. For example, this time.
Yeah,
But-
I totally get what you're saying, though. Like, I remember, I think I was 7 or 8 months sober. Luckily, again, for me, like, new-ish. I didn't have something nearly as, you know, traumatic as that happened, but my sponsor taught me pretty quickly. Perfect. Thanks, God, for bringing this up in my head. You're good. Sometimes it does that. It's fine. I just love that we're talking about this. So I heard in the rooms, and I've heard it several times, there's no wrong way to pray. And personally, I kind of disagree with that statement. And so when I was working with my sponsor, she had explained to me everything that we're talking about right now. And she's like, just kind of talking about the difference of praying for self or praying for the outcome that you want. And so from the very, very beginning, and it's been really helpful for my recovery, when I pray, I do things like, you know, give me the strength and the courage and the willingness to do what I think you would have me do, and have me accept that the outcome is going to be exactly what it's supposed to, right? I set myself up in a position of getting ready. Like, I hope for the best, expect the worst, and I'm just going to keep working.
Yeah.
And generally when I do that, then I'm okay with the outcome no matter what it is.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. And then the other thing that I'm fairly certain that God isn't is punishing. Because if God is a God of justice, we're all in a lot of trouble.
Yeah. Yeah, we are.
And I have also seen the danger of that. I remember one time I went on a 12-step call. This is back in Halifax. This is a long time ago. I went on this 12-step call, and we went over to this guy's house, apartment, and we sat down and talked to him. And, you know, he's obviously in real rough shape. And so we talked to him, and he's like, yeah, I know about, you know, the whole AA thing, but I've got a problem. I'm like, okay, what's that? And he's like, well, I'm a Jehovah's Witness. I said, okay. I'm not an expert in theology here, so I'm not understanding in the moment what this problem is. And he says, well, the things that I have done are such that I cannot be forgiven. And I was like, okay, there's no possible way that you could that you could get free or be forgiven of what you've done. He said, no, I am going to hell. And I said, are you even willing to consider that may not be the case? Is there any possibility that may not be the case? And he said, no. And then I said, well, what can you do then? What is there to be done? And he said, I don't think there's anything to be done. And it's like, that's terrible. That's brutal.
Yeah.
That's brutal, because this man
Yeah.
is literally condemning himself to suffering
Yeah.
forever.
Ugh.
And that was his belief system. And I mean, when somebody believes something to their core, it's pretty hard to get past that,
Yeah.
you know? not to say that's impossible, not to say that I hope and pray that man got past that, although I never witnessed it. It's a really hard thing to deal with. So if I believe that God is punishing, then I am liable to I don't know if it's...
I totally understand. I think I understand where you're going with it. If you think something's punishing, there's a much bigger chance of you being like, fuck it, why bother?
Well, yeah. Well, because literally,
You're
why
fucked.
bother?
You're fucked.
You're exactly.
Yeah.
There's nothing that can be done for you. You're done for. So those are the two things that I like to iron out. Beyond that, I mean, I have heard at times, going back to my early experience in AA, I got sober in the era when people talked about your higher power can be a doorknob or a light bulb. And
I've heard that too.
That's just fantastic. I mean, I can unscrew a light bulb and remove it. That seems unsuitable.
Yeah.
I'd say ruling out the asinine, inanimate objects. I really don't have any concern with what other people's conception of God is. It's creative intelligence, spirit of the universe, and energy. I have a lot of thoughts about it. I won't get into what my thoughts are on it because it isn't those two things. I think that's essential.
Right. I know for myself for step 2, and I feel like it's something that I should say, so hopefully it helps other people, but I was pretty resentful when I came in and I listened to everyone say, this is not a religious program. It is a spiritual program, but I'm going to put God on the wall a bunch of times because I didn't understand the concept of the word without the religious affiliation. Mm-hmm. I didn't. And I really like in the book how it talks about how we thought we neatly evaded the God idea entirely. And so it's what kept me out when I tried 15 years ago. And it's what almost kept me out, but because of being beaten into a state of reasonableness and getting rid of all those other alternatives, I was willing to give it a try. But I do remember it's very hard for that closed-minded, I don't know. I just think it's really important because I got really mad being like, what do you mean it's not religious? Everything you're talking about is religious. I'm like, it's not. It's really not.
Yeah. It's not unless you want it to be.
Yeah.
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 Yeah. There's another thing in step 2 that I think is really important. Oh, there's infinite things in step 2 that are really, really important. But this is something I like to really hone in on when I'm working with someone. On page 53, there is a choice. It says, what is our choice to be? And it says, we had to fearlessly face the proposition that either God is everything or else God is nothing. God either is or he isn't. And so what was our choice to be? And I think this is important, but I think often not in the way that people understand it to be important.
Okay.
Because I think a lot of people present this like, well, I'm choosing whether there is or isn't a God.
Okay.
And I think that's a kind of a funny concept because whatever you may believe about a God or whatever the nature of a God or the absence of a God may be, your thoughts on it are truly irrelevant.
Yeah.
And I we talk about the cake recipe and baking cakes. I don't like labeling highlighting things a certain way, but
I've never learned the cake recipe. I just love so for me, I love how each thing represents a different, it's easier for me to spot things, but I've never learned that way to do it.
Yeah.
I start from the beginning. I read through.
Okay.
I follow the directions, and life
Yeah.
is pretty good. Shocker.
Again, the names and the concepts are largely irrelevant. But I like to use the analogy of baking a cake
Yeah.
for this, because whether I believe that there is a God or there isn't, or whatever its nature may be, my thoughts on that are truly irrelevant. If I take, let's say I don't believe in cakes. A cake is impossible. I do not believe in cakes, Yet, if I take all of the ingredients for a cake, I mix them up as per some recipe, I place them, this batter in an oven. Now, whether I believe I'm going to get a cake or not, because of the nature of cakes, provided I have followed this recipe and that cake is in fact that's a cake recipe, I'm going to get a cake. Now, I could sit outside the oven and go, I don't believe in cakes. Cakes don't exist. There's no possible way a cake's going to come out of this oven. But if I have done this, I will get a cake.
You just blew my mind. That's amazing.
Yeah.
I love this analogy.
Yeah.
I love that.
And so this thing is not, is there a God or isn't there? This is entirely about am I going to act as though there is?
Right.
Is there a God? I don't know, but I act like there is. Mm-hmm. This is my choice, is to make God everything in my life. This does not impact the nature of God. We're so self-centered and so self-important that we think that we have a decision in whether there is a God or not, or
right.
whatever its nature may be.
I love that.
That is an amusing concept.
Yeah.
But I have to choose, am I going to make God everything on a go-forward basis going through these steps? And if I do, then my actions are going to be very different than if I don't.
Right.
And this has been proven in my experience, because I have worked with people who, after the fact, said, I did not believe there was a God. I thought this was all bullshit, and I'm going to do this in spite, and I'm going to do everything you say, but they follow the instructions. They do the things,
and by the time they get to the end,
they make the hard amends. They write the inventory. They do all the stuff, and they come out the other side, and they have been changed. But it comes down to how I'm going to act, not what the reality is.
Right.
Because whatever God is or isn't, or however that goes, it doesn't matter what I think about it. It just matters what I do.
Totally.
Yeah.
I love that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm just thinking of when I go through this with people, I have a lot of fun in the next couple paragraphs after that question, because it has all these great questions. And I don't know if people overlook these questions, but I did for a long time. And they, 2 paragraphs after that, it talked about being brought to where we stood by a certain kind of faith. And then it begs the question, did we not believe in our own reasoning? Did we not have confidence in our ability to think? And I mean, maybe it's just a sort of sadistic joy or something, but I absolutely love going through that and asking those questions, because, it's like, hey, do you have confidence in your ability to think? And all, these guys get like a month.
Oh, yeah.
Like, oh, yeah, totally. Yeah, yeah. And it's like, why? Do you have any reason to have that? And they're just like,
Did we not just talk about the benevolence a few minutes ago?
Yeah, exactly. Like, you're where are you living? Are you allowed to have your own shoes? I don't know. Oh, mercy.
That's funny.
Step 2 is, I mean, it has a depth that I don't know that we can ever really reach.
I think that's very well put.
Yeah. I remember listening to, it was a thing from Joe Hawk, and he had talked about going to this guru doing a talk when he was in India, because he lived in India for 5 years studying with one of the Dalai Lama's teachers. And he talked about going to this thing, and he's listening to this guy, and this guy's talking about, take the wheels off a car. When's it not a car? Take the engine out. Is it still a car? What if you take off the doors? Is it still a car? When does a car no longer a car? And he's going through all these analogies, and then at the end, he's like, I want to lead you in a prayer. And, Joe's got all these ideas, and he's like, what are we praying to? Like, is there no God? Like, what is this? And he said, I want to pray to relieve God of the bondage of the ideas and personalities and characteristics that we've assigned to God.
Okay.
Yeah. Because all of those things are just reflections of us.
Right.
And not reflections of whatever God is or isn't.
I love that.
Yeah.
Awesome. Thank you for sharing that.
Yeah.
Heck yeah.
Yeah.
Is that it for 2?
Sure.
Cool. Step 3.
Okay.
Oh my goodness. So, for me, the biggest misconceptions that I've heard in the rooms, and I feel like it's important to, and maybe we'll go through all the misconceptions and then talk about why these things happen towards the end. I was thinking about just doing that now, but whatever. I can't tell you how many times I've had people say, whether in shares, come up to me, talk to me, sponsees, whatever, that ask about a specific timeline after doing 3 before doing 4. And it drives me bananas because this is a part of, I can quote quite a few pages in the book, but right after 3, it literally says, though our decision was a vital and crucial step, it would have little permanent effect unless at once, followed by a strenuous effort to face the things that we need to face. Yeah. And so I don't know why it's so common. People are like, oh, I have to turn it over. I have to turn it over. Yeah, it's step 3. I got to be willing. I got to turn it over. I'm like, but how are you going to do that? By doing the rest of the steps. Yeah. You're going to learn how to do that through doing this process of eliminating self. Yeah. Do it.
I mean, the rest of the steps literally are turning your will and life over to the care of God as you understand Him. I mean, I know for myself, when I go through this with somebody, we read right up to the end of the 3rd step promises, and I'll give them a day or 2 to think about it. Because if, maybe they're...
Are you in or out?
They're at least going to think about it.
Right.
And then the next time we sit down, it's like, okay, you've had a chance to think about it. Let's hold hands and pray. And then I get these I go to Walmart, sometimes.
Yeah.
And every once in a while, they'll have all these 80-page coil-bound notebooks
for
like
you gave
15
me one.
cents.
Yeah.
Whenever I see that, I'm like, give me all these. A stack of them. And so we say this prayer, and we're like, okay. And then I just whip out a notebook and go, okay, make a list.
Here we go.
And I just look at them, and I'll make sure to never break eye contact with them to just, mess with them a little bit. And
just make them that much more comfortable.
Yeah, just start writing. Let's go. Let's get names.
Yeah.
I like snapping my fingers at people. I don't know if the mic picked that up. But
I heard it.
Okay.
I think you're good.
That's good. That's good.
It's okay. Yeah. You're being videotaped too. So we're
good.
Good.
So, no, it's immediate. It's like we do this now. There's nothing in here. It does say, we thought well before taking this step about step 3. And I think it is worthy of consideration. It's worthy of thinking about it for a day or 2. A day or 2. Mm-hmm. I'm not going more than that. I don't let anybody think too much here. But, we do this immediately.
You know what's funny? I remember doing step 3. I mean, when I did step 3 the first time, like all of us, I was sick, man. I was super spiritually sick. I didn't understand 3, right? I had to do the rest of it to understand it, but and I don't know if I have any additional impact on my sponsees today. I hope so, But I really go into detail and offer my experiences when it's talking about self-propulsion and trying to play
Yep.
these roles and trying to be modest and self-sacrificing, because I did not have an understanding of what that was at all when I read it the first time.
Yeah.
Like, I really didn't. And I love being able, because now we know the problem, and now we know what the solution is, but now I also have an opportunity to understand why things went so awry, right? What does it mean to live in self and all these character defects and how it comes in? And it's just something that I love really talking about, because like so many of us don't understand that being self-sacrificing is selfish, depending on how you're doing it.
Yeah.
Right. And I had to go through a lot of experiences. I talk in another episode about a friend of mine who did a Secret Santa at work. And she's like, I'm really resentful right now. And I'm like, well, why? She's like, because I tried to get people at my work in the Christmas spirit. I wanted everyone to have a good time. And I wanted people to have gifts. And then I spent all this time trying to find a really good gift for my person. I got a shit gift and nobody fucking thanked me. And I was like, okay.
Yep.
So do you see your part at all? And she's like, no, I don't understand. I'm like, okay, like, no worries. Like, this is one of my favorite examples. I'm like,
Yep.
so why did you do this? Because I feel like you just said it was because you wanted to put people in the Christmas spirit and make everyone have a good time and get gifts. And she's like, yeah. And I'm like, sounds like you did it to get thanked. Sounds to me like you only gave because you had the expectation of receiving something in return. And that is the definition of selfishness. I'm like, kindness with wanting a return is manipulation. Yeah. If you want to be kind, you have to choose to be kind. And what happens from that is none of your business anymore. You need, and then like, so it was funny that brought us back to 3. And then that was the first time she was like, oh, like, yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. That's, yeah. One of my favorite things in going through step 3 with people is the description of the relationship with God. It gives the parameters of God's, we're an actor, God's going to be the director. He's the principal, we are his agents, he's the father, we are his children. And I love going through that with people. Because it is a perfect description of what is asked of us. God being a director. It's like, I love to go through, what does a director do? And I think it also, it dispels one of the concerns that I think a lot of people have. We talk about misconceptions. There is a line in here. It says, am I to be consigned to a life where I am stupid, boring, and glum? And this idea of God being a director, I think, says absolutely not. Here's why. Let's say I'm making a movie and I am the director. Okay. Well, I have a script. I have a picture of the scene I am trying to set, of the things I'm trying to bring out of the audience. Like, I'm trying to get them to feel something, get them to see something. Maybe I'm trying to get them to laugh, whatever. I've got this premise that I'm trying to get across. Well, if I'm the director, I get to pick the actors. Now, there's infinite movies. There's all different types of actors that go into each of those movies. And I always use the example, like, if I'm making a Christopher Walken kind of movie, I'm not gonna cast Adam Sandler.
Right.
Although, not to criticize Adam Sandler's acting skills, because he's put out some bangers. But,
yeah, he has.
It's beside the point. Point is, the director gets to choose the actor. And it's an actor that's suited for the role.
I love that.
Yeah. And not only that, but I can think of an example from this whereby an actor shows up to something and goes to the director and says, hey, this is an amazing thing you're trying to create. Imagine if you created it like this. The example is Leonardo DiCaprio's character in Django Unchained.
Okay.
They were originally going to cast an older, like 50s, 60s, like a Jeremy Irons, something like that.
Okay.
And Leonardo DiCaprio reads this and he's like, oh my, I have this idea.
Yeah.
And it it actually paints an even more dramatic, stark picture of the character. And he goes to Quentin Tarantino and pitches him like, "Hey, this is what this is what you're trying to get across.
Yeah.
Let me do it, and let me show you what I can do with this character that you're trying to create." And Quentin Tarantino says, "Yes, I love this. Let's do it." And he creates a truly fantastic character. I mean, again, not pitching movies here, but you know what I mean? Like, he creates an incredible character in this.
Yeah.
And I believe we get to do the same thing.
Mm-hmm.
We all have talents. We all have things that we're really skilled at. Why would that not be put to use in a relationship with God?
Right.
Why would that not be put to use in our lives to create the absolute maximum impact that we can have on the world through what is set out for us in the character we're here to play, or all the characters we're here to play?
Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's just a different concept and way to look at it. And for me, it's a better one. I find it's much more effective.
Well, yeah, I mean, it makes it a little more simple too, right? Like, what I'm thinking in my head is like an actor doing something, the director says cut and says, "Okay, that was great, but I'd like to change this, this, and this. Now try to shift this." So if you're seeking the director's advice before doing it, it's going to take less times till you get it.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
and
I love that.
The director's still setting the scene.
Right.
The director, says to us, "Hey, I'm empowering you, principal and agent. I'm empowering you to fill a role, and you need to be of service. You need to be of service in all areas of your life as much as you possibly can be. And that's because it's the only way you're going to be satisfied."
Mm-hmm.
So, but I'm the actor. I have the script, and I can say, "Wow, wait a second. That's what you want. You want me to create this picture. Well, what if I do it like this?"
Mm-hmm.
And if I'm really off base, I'm going to be aware. I'm going to see it. I'll make some adjustments. But ultimately, I'm put in this role to play it as best as I possibly can within the framework of, hey, I'm here to be of service. I'm here to love and be kind and all of these kinds of things, and make myself available to the material of life and all the people in it.
Love that.
Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
All right, moving on.
Okay.
Step 4.
Step 4.
Misconceptions about 4.
Well, the scary thing. Yeah.
I would love to know where that came from. It's so common. Step 4, scary. No, it's not.
Yeah, I don't know. I really don't know where it came from.
It's very common.
I heard it lots when I came in. You go to a meeting, there'd be 50 people there, none of whom had ever written a step 4. Then they'd share about how scary it was.
You know what I think might contribute to it? I just thought of this. I might actually be contributing to it unknowingly, so maybe it's good we're having this conversation. How many times have I shared on step 4 and said, people in the rooms keep saying that it's scary. It's not scary. I might absent-mindedly be putting it in the heads of somebody by even just like, if it's not a problem, don't even fucking talk about it.
Yeah.
Just thought of that. Because I've also heard a lot of other people do that as well, but I definitely used to do that. Yeah, step 4 is not scary.
I mostly find step 4 amusing.
As when you went through it yourself or now?
No, mostly now.
Okay, I was going to say, I'm like... I was not amused when I did step 4. I was mad because everything I wrote down, I'm like, their fault, their fault, their fault. I'm not afraid of anything. It's everyone else's problem, not my problem.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Now,
explain more. Why are you amused by step 4 now?
Well, I mean, because they're all the same.
Oh, yeah. Don't worry about doing 4s and 5s, guys. We've heard it all.
Yeah.
You can't surprise us anymore.
You're not, we need caffeine to stay awake. This is not all that exciting. I find it particularly amusing when because people they'll see something and they'll get upset. I love it. I just I like to bring it, because I know some people, I hear stories from other people about, someone sits there and tells them how they've been selfish or how they've been dishonest or all that. And I don't do that, just because the way I like to write inventory, if you write a long form of the third column, whereby you look at your self-esteem, what you believe about yourself, and then you literally write out statements like, I believe this. It's like, I'm mad because she cheated on me. Self-esteem. Well, I'm a honest, I act with integrity and faithful, all these guys, and it's like, the hell is this crap? This is crap. Like, this is the biggest lie I've ever seen, It's like, none of these things. It's just amusing.
Yeah.
And people may write that down and then look at it and realize what they believe and how dishonest it is, and they frequently get upset, and then I get amused.
Right.
Yeah.
But it sounds like that probably helps them get to it quicker.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
I love personally doing it that way. It is more work, and it can be harder for someone who's new to get through. That's why I tend to sit with them while they're doing it. But I find it far more effective because let's say we're going to go through this, and then I'm going to sit there and tell you all these things about yourself. Well, that's not a tool that you can use independent of me. It's a tool you may be able to apply to someone else.
Okay.
But absent someone else telling you the truth about what's written there, you may not see it.
Right.
Well, if I have a tool to write it out and write out my beliefs and all like my self-esteem, my ambitions, what I want, my security, what I need to be okay, my pride, what I think other people think about me.
Mm-hmm.
I start writing those beliefs out, and I can take one look at them, and I've written stuff in there that I genuinely had never seen before and was entirely unaware of, and I saw it and I'm like, wow, oh my God.
I believe that
I
shit.
believe that. That's in my head.
Yeah.
And that is, it's radically dishonest. It's, full of fear, whatever. It's unbelievably selfish. And I can come to those truths independent of someone sitting there and telling me about them.
Right.
Now, and then when I can share it with someone else, I'm really sharing what I believe. I'm really sharing these truths about me. And rather than, it's like, I've seen some of the worksheets and they have like check boxes, my self-esteem, check. It's like, well, I get, that's fine, but I get very little information from that.
Yeah.
So writing it out in that way, I tend to see truths. And so when other people see those truths, I laugh. And it's funny because we're all the same.
Yeah.
Like, no one's writing new stuff in there.
No.
I'm desperately afraid of what people think of me, and I'm afraid of this and that, and it's all the same crap.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's in regards to the third column for resentments.
Yeah.
When I asked you to do this episode with me, you were very excited about talking about fear.
Yes.
And I feel like now, we're there now.
We are here.
Yeah, I'm excited.
Okay.
Teach me.
So my experience with fear inventory is people will write some amount of fear inventory, but it's like they don't know what to do with it beyond that.
Okay.
Of writing it out. And none of this is a writing exercise. None of these things that we're doing to just to write them down. We're doing them to extract tools from them.
Right.
And in the fear inventory, as far as I can tell, there is, I write it with like three points of focus. One, what the fear is. Mm-hmm. Two, why do I have this fear? And it's not a archaeological dig in my life of, my mother put me down the wrong way when I was 3, and so now I'm afraid of abandonment. It's more like, why would I be afraid of this thing? Like, why should this be the subject of fear? And I go into it because I'll have all these beliefs around this thing. Like, if I don't have enough money, then no one's going to like me, and I'm going to be alone forever, and I'll blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
And I'll probably just say, screw it, and I can relapse, and then I'll die. Stuff like that. All my dreams will never come true.
Right.
All of these things. And then I look at my self-reliance, how I've tried to rely on myself to resolve these fears, all the crazy things that I do that are usually counterintuitive or whatever, and then ultimately fail. They don't work, because if self-reliance worked on fear, we wouldn't have them. We would just self-rely our way out of fear. And then the final instruction is this prayer at the end, this general format prayer that they give us, which is, we ask God to remove our fear and direct our attention to what he would have us be. And so what I have people do is, as we go through this, we write out this prayer, and we go to some reasonable concept of what might God have me be with respect to this fear. But I have them write it out, and then instead of just leaving it in their 4th step, I like to have them transcribe these most prominent fears, the prayers from this, onto like a cue card.
Okay.
Because the real, juicy part of this is working with those prayers.
Okay.
It's not, so I've written this inventory, and because I've written the self-reliance, because when my mind is telling me I need to go do this because I'm afraid, I know I'm in fear. I have all this information to help me identify when I am actually in the fear. Like, when am I being driven by this fear in a moment-to-moment basis?
Okay.
All of this information is relevant to that. Because either my mind's saying, this is going to happen, that's going to happen. And then it's saying, oh, now you need to go do this. Well, when I have that whole narrative going in my head, I know I'm in that fear. I can see it. That's why I wrote the inventory in the first place. And the next step is, I must go to prayer. Like, I must try to align my will with God's will. Or at least away from my will.
Right.
And that prayer and the specific way it's written, that's what it's for. And I have found many people who have never done that. They've written out some sort of fear inventory, but it was really just like I took a cataloging of these fears and I shared them with someone. Not a bad thing. Not a bad thing at all. But it does not give the true use of the tools that writing that prayer out, and especially, taking the practical step. I love, put it on a cue card, put it in your pocket. So, the next day when you're full of fear, you can pull it out and just go straight to prayer.
Right. I really like that, because for me, like, I remember the hardest thing that I struggled with in the beginning was remembering to pray, right? And that was like, when I was trying to start applying all these things that I had just learned, I'd like go home and be like, oh, that would have been helpful 7 hours ago, but I wasn't aware of it. So what I had done is I set a reminder, like an alarm, to go off on my phone every 2 hours all day.
Yep.
For like 2 weeks. And then it would go off. Be like, did you pray? Did you have a reason to pray? If you didn't have a reason, did you say thank you? Are you thinking about God right now? Did you pray? And then I used it constantly to put me in just this ability to start making it a habit, so that when something came up, it would have been a lot easier if I had a cue card. I like that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's kind of an obtrusive thing you put in your pocket, and it
Yeah.
rubs against your leg, and it's there.
You always could feel it. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool.
Absolutely. So that's my thing on fear inventory.
The first time I went through fear inventory, and I've heard this since, so I think it's worth bringing up. Misconceptions in the room. whether or not your fear is rational or irrational. Have you heard about this?
Yeah.
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 So the way that I was taught, because it was taught to them, and I realized after we had some extra work to do, that was the third column. Is this irrational or is it rational? Which to me doesn't really matter for what I'm trying to accomplish in that, right? But I had completely missed over the self-reliance piece, right? Which is one of the more important parts of doing this. Like,
Yeah.
what's a good example? I'm afraid of confrontation. Why? Because I'm afraid that if I say how I really feel, people won't like me. So it turns out I'm afraid that people won't like me, right? How has self-reliance failed me? I avoid it and hope it'll go away,
Yeah.
right? That's how self has failed me constantly.
Yeah.
That's where I need to start asking God to help me change, right? How would you do it? Live your truth, be loving and tolerant, and stand up for yourself, right?
The rational or irrational question is that's an interesting thing. I haven't encountered that.
Okay.
I mean, it is an interesting thing though, because I mean, it's an interesting question. Is it relevant or not? Does it matter if it's rational? The way I look at it is, does this impact my life? So, like, okay, I give for example. I don't love heights.
Right.
Okay, I don't love them. I know some people who are near fearless around things like that. I can think of a particular person, and I've seen them do some things, and I'm just like, I would die. I would die. And frankly, I wonder if you might doing them too. But but it doesn't impact my life. Like,
Right.
there are probably, I believe there are people so afraid of heights they can't go on a plane, they can't cross a bridge, they can't, like that. Okay, that's impacting your life. For me, I've worked roofing, I've done stuff like that, but I just was uncomfortable standing near the edge of a roof.
Right.
If I had fall protection on, I could do it. I'm okay. I still don't love it, but it doesn't stop me from living my life. The question I ask people is like, is this something that stops you from living your life, from doing things you ought to do or need to do or want to do? What's, is it driving you?
Yeah.
That's the question I ask. Because if it's not, then rational or irrational, whatever, doesn't matter.
Exactly.
You know, like I don't love failure. I'd rather not fail. It kind of sucks, it's not fun. It usually learn lessons, blah blah blah, whatever. Yeah. But like, I don't like it.
Right.
But does the fear of failure stop me from
Living.
doing things? And at one time it did.
Right.
At one time it really did. Today it doesn't. I'm still out doing things, and sometimes I fail at things, and it sucks, and I don't like it, and it hurts. But then I go do something else, because it's not holding me back anymore. And that's the real question. Yeah.
Fun fact, totally has nothing to do with the book, but but it's a fun fact. I love this. So the program that I went through, the court mandated program I did, they had their own 16-step procedure for things that they did. It wasn't like a regular program. It was their program. And so I remember step 3, one of my favorite things, and it really, really helped me with fears and how I wrap my brain around which ones really affect my ability to live. And so it said, what are the 3 things that you worry about the most? Write those down. And at that time, it was relapsing, going to jail, disappointing my parents. And so it was just this really awesome exercise because you could see the smirks. So when you do this, you're in a group of other people and everyone's on different steps. So the people that already knew about this step, you could see them being like, getting real excited. And I didn't know why. And then I found out. So my caseworker was like, okay, let's talk about disappointing your parents. What have you done today to make that happen? And I was like, nothing. Like I immediately got defensive. I'm like, what do you mean? She's like, stop. What have you done today to disappoint them? I'm like, nothing. She's like, okay, what have you done to make sure you don't? And I said, well, I'm here. I went to a meeting this morning. I'm meeting my sponsor later. I'm doing this. I'm doing that. I'm doing this. And she's like, so what you're telling me is you're taking action to do all of the things to ensure that this doesn't happen. And I said, yeah. She said, then why are you worried about it? And I was like, I don't know. And all the people are like, right? Just seeing this light bulb. And for me, that was extremely helpful in doing this process because I didn't have to worry about whittling through the fears because that took away a bunch of them. I'm like, as long as I'm doing what I think I should be doing, what my sponsor's telling me to do is the right thing and doing the work, I'm good.
Yeah.
I'm good. And that really helped me with my fear inventory.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Just love that.
Yeah.
It's still helpful today.
Yeah.
Anytime I start to feel a little, I'm just like, I'm doing everything that I can and should be doing. That's all I can do.
Yeah.
So I'm not going to worry about it.
Yep.
It is what it is.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. Step 5.
Yeah. What about it?
Misconceptions about step 5. I think we've kind of already touched on the only thing I can think of is that the misconception is that like it's hard for people to open up about their deepest, darkest stuff when the actual truth is once you've heard 4 or 5 of them, you've heard everything you're ever going to hear.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, the amazing part is if you just write someone's inventory with them, you've already heard it all.
Right.
And they don't even notice.
True.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
All right. We'll just blow past that one.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think step 6 and 7, they love, I want to talk about how people love to pair those two together.
Okay.
Lots of times in the rooms, I hear people say, let's talk 6 and 7, let's 6 and 7, 6 and 7, 6 and 7. My understanding is that they're very different steps. And I could understand, like for me, I could understand why there is misconceptions in the room, especially around 7, because it's a paragraph long. But what I commonly see is that there's trying to be, like I've gone to a bunch of different rooms where whenever 7 is talked about, they don't use the book. They use the 12 and 12 and they read from that. And then they talk about the importance of humility. Okay, cool. But how do you actually gain humility? By doing step 7. Okay, but how do you work step 7? It's only a paragraph. Well, let's go back to, and it seems to be like this vicious cycle. And there's a lack of understanding that 7 is something that's lived and you're daily asking God to bring you experiences on how to build your character. And you can build character quickly by continuing to work all the steps.
Yeah.
That's my biggest thing. But
Yeah.
people always talk about 6 and 7 together. Like 6, my understanding is that 6 is the reflection time to take a look at your 4 and 5 and be like, I don't want to live this way anymore.
I mean, if you look specifically at the instructions, there is returning home, which is at the end of the 5th step. And it isn't until after returning home and taking a quiet hour of reflection post 5th step, then it says, if we can answer to our satisfaction the questions in returning home,
Yeah.
I am satisfied with the work I have done up to this point. Then we look at step 6.
Yep.
And it is just a short series of considerations. Although I think they're critical. Am I ready to let go of these things that I have identified?
Yeah.
The patterns of behavior that I've seen, the motivations that have driven me into all of this stuff. Am I willing to let go of it? Am I, then it says, can he now take them all, every one? Am I willing to believe that that is possible?
Right.
Am I willing to believe it's possible for me to be free of all these things? That's a consideration. Maybe I look at it and I say, I don't think that's possible. Okay. Well, have I just placed a limitation on God? Is whatever conception I have up to that moment one that doesn't allow for that? I don't know. It's a consideration. Am I willing to believe that I will be relieved of these things?
Right.
Am I willing to believe they'll be removed? in some form or fashion, whatever that looks like. That's another willingness question.
Yeah.
These are important considerations. And then it says, if we still cling to something, we'll not let go. We ask God to help us be willing. So, I mean, these are the willingness to change.
Yeah.
The willingness to be changed.
Yeah.
I have heard it said that to be willing to be changed is to already be changed.
Okay.
And it is a sort of separate consideration from the reflection and the sort of information gathering, fact-finding, fact-facing process
Okay.
in step 4 and 5.
Yep.
Because that is merely, hey, here's where you're at. Here's an identification of all of the conditions of your life and how you're living and how you think and what you believe up to this point. Here's all of it.
Right.
Now, it is very common to go through that and say, wow, I am not thrilled about this.
Yeah.
This is not working, evidently. Yeah. And then the subsequent question is just, okay, in light of that,
Right.
are you willing to let go? Are you willing, like, do you want to change? Because maybe you read it and you go, well, I don't want to change. You know, I like the results I'm getting. I mean, usually not.
Yeah.
You know, usually you don't make it through step 4 and 5 because you're thrilled with the results you've been getting up to that point.
Right.
But it is a separate consideration. And then step 7, I mean, like, I do understand why people would lump these together.
Right.
They are each one paragraph right next to each other in the big book.
Yeah.
On the same page even.
Yeah.
I can see why. But 6 is distinct from 7. You know, it is consideration of willingness, you know, and to become willing. And then step 7 is really just like an affirmation of that willingness. And it's, you know, it's saying, and it's for me to reflect to myself as well, like, I'm willing for this to be changed. And I ask for it to be removed in a way, you know, remove anything that stands in the way of my usefulness.
Right.
And I think part of that is an acknowledgement that I don't know. It says, remove from me every single defective character which stands in the way of my usefulness.
Yeah.
Well, what if I have some character defect that doesn't stand in the way of my usefulness?
Ah.
Maybe I do. Well, is that to be removed? I don't know. Again, I don't know. I don't have the answers. I do have questions, though. And I like to note that is how it is worded for a specific reason. And I believe that reason is, and I think it's something we often see a lot in step 4 and 5, is we have all these things about us that we think work. And then we write inventory and we see maybe they don't work so well.
Right.
Well, I don't have a great track record of determining what about me needs to change and what doesn't. And am I to simply play musical chairs with defects? Or am I to actually turn my will over to God? Because I can, you know, it's like, oh, wow, I look in my inventory and it's like, well, look how angry I've been. So now I'll just do the opposite of that.
Yeah. I just won't be angry anymore.
I'm just going to be the nicest doormat that ever was. Well, that's me creating myself in my own image. And that's not effective. You know, again, my instruction here is simply, I am making an affirmation of a decision that God, I am to be changed by you. And I don't know what that means exactly, you know, but I am here and I am throwing myself in front of you at your mercy that I may be remade in an image of usefulness. And then immediately it says, we have then completed step 7. Now we need more action.
Yeah.
You know, so
Now we need more action.
Now we need more
Followed
action.
at once and now.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so yeah, I mean, that's, again, I think talk about humility. Well, what is more humble than saying, I don't even know how I am supposed to be? I have some clear ideas about things that I probably ought not to be. I've seen the results of my selfishness and my self-reliance, and all that. Okay. So I know I ought not to be self-reliant. Well, how do I not be self-reliant? Well, I throw myself before God and say, make me as I need to be made.
Right.
What could be more humble than that? Rather than saying, okay, well, here are my defects and here's how I'm going to work on them. Well, again, I feel like the working on defects thing is, I don't know what that means. I stopped asking people what it means. I've ceased fighting at least that.
Right.
I'm not going to claim I've ceased fighting everything and everyone all the time, no matter what, but I'm not fighting that one.
Fair enough.
But no, I affirm that I do not know, and then I move on. And it's not to say that continued willingness, continued awareness to things, defects within myself are not important and meaningful. And a continued, willingness to be changed.
Right.
That I sit here today and it's like, well, God, if there is something about me that needs to change so that I may be maximum usefulness, then here I am.
Right.
Do with me what you will. But beyond that, I don't know what there is to do. Well, actually, I do. It's steps 8 and 9.
More action.
That's more action.
More action. All right. So let's talk about those.
Okay.
Do you have any? I can't think of anything that I've actually heard that's a misconception of how to make a list of people.
I have.
Okay. What do you got?
Yeah. I have heard the concept that people are to make a list of people that they want to go make amends to, that they might be willing to go make amends to, and some that they're never willing to go make amends to.
Yeah, I totally did that.
Yeah.
But see, I found it very helpful.
Okay.
Because I was told ahead of time, as you do this.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Proceed.
And that is true. It's simply a misconception that instruction has anything to do with the big book.
Right.
Whether
it's not in there.
whether someone finds it in some way practically helpful or not, that's fine. I don't argue with other people's sponsors. That's a losing battle. I just note that it is not in the big book.
Right.
And it's not something that I practice. So that's a misconception. Other misconceptions. I've heard interesting misconceptions around the concept of to injure them or others. And
isn't that 9 though?
Well, okay, I suppose if we're still in step 8, I look at them more or less in the same way they do in the book,
as they do it. 8 and 9.
Okay. 8 and 9.
Okay.
8 and 9.
Yep.
But
yes, I would love to talk about the injure them or others because
Yeah.
I had that come up with somebody recently. So
injure them or others is, I feel like they give the best example in here, in the book. The examples in here are fantastic.
yeah.
The example of the guy who runs around on his wife and his wife doesn't know. Do I tell somebody something that they do not know that will actively make their life worse? One that I run across a lot is gossip. People who gossiped about someone else. This is a very, my Lord, the fellowship and the gossiping is just, oh my.
Bunch of sick people in a room together.
Ooh.
It's going to happen.
It's going to happen. So how do you make amends for gossiping? And what I find is a lot of people think, well, I need to go to this person who I have gossiped about. And, and I'm like, well, do they know you gossiped about them? And usually it's like, well, I don't think so. And it's like, okay. Then if imagine someone comes to you and says, hey, I talked a lot of shit about you behind your back. What can I do to,
My bad.
What can I do to make this right?
Yeah.
My mind's going to go, who did you say this to? What did you say?
Yeah.
I'm going to be out of sorts. My experience says, and this is what I generally share with people is, no, you need to go to the people you gossiped about them to. And you need to clean stuff up with them. Because this person doesn't know, and they may never know, and it may never affect them, but it affected the people you gossiped to, because you made them complicit in what you're doing, and you demonstrated that it was okay, and probably led, blah, 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 blah.
That's a really great example.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so to injure them or others, to go tell them this, you're gonna stir some shit up there. Versus you go to those people and you humbly put forward that you ought not to have done that, and that possibly you were wrong, so on and so forth. I hear about it a lot with past relationships.
Okay.
That's an interesting one. I think I talked a fair bit about that in the episode we did on steps 8 and 9. And so I guess if you're listening to this and you haven't heard that one,
review,
you should probably go listen to it. But I've heard people be told, don't go to any of your exes. Oh, I've heard that. Oh yeah.
What?
And yeah, no, I have heard that.
Okay.
And
what's the reasoning behind that?
Well, that you might cause more harm by stirring things up in their life.
Goodness gracious.
Yeah. And I don't see any instruction on that in this book. Mm-hmm. That I believe is an opinion. Mm-hmm. And I do think it requires tact, an awful lot of tact, and
for sure
you need to tread carefully, and but it's not a reason not to do it. It's not a reason not to give them a chance to get healing and closure from that. Mm-hmm. But that's a misconception that I've heard.
There's so many for 9.
There are.
Let me ask you a question.
Okay.
What does them or others mean?
Them or others. Okay. Well, let's say I've done something in conjunction with someone else.
Okay.
And I am to go make an amend, and it's going to throw them under the bus too.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. I don't have the right to do that.
Right.
And so if someone else is to be impacted, we consult with them. Right. I guess to injure them or others. I guess you could also look at it, imagine going to the best example in the big book of, dude runs around on his wife. Mm-hmm. It's like, well, maybe you got kids.
Right.
And you're gonna upend everyone's life.
Right.
In addressing this matter, which is otherwise unknown.
Right. So the reason I ask is a misconception I hear all the time.
Okay.
Them or others are two very big words that have nothing to do with self.
Yes.
Them or others. And people constantly talk about how that includes yourself.
I think the big book is very direct on that. On page 79, It says, we ask that we be given strength and direction to do the right thing, no matter what the personal consequences may be.
I think it's like 3 times in there that it's like, remember, we said at the beginning we were willing to go to, like, there's a reminder, because step 9 is you're facing stuff.
Yeah.
I'm not going to say it's hard, but it can be difficult to do that stuff. But it's something I hear all the time. And I went to a room a couple of years ago all the time where when people read the opening readings, they said them or others, which includes yourself. And people were adding that in. And I was like, it's not on there for a reason.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh.
And so I really want to make sure that.
I would have taken exception to that. I don't know if I would have been able to have ceased fighting anything or anyone under those circumstances.
Well, and here's the thing, right?
Oh.
How many people are in the rooms that
Yeah.
don't know, right?
know.
How do we learn? Because we go to the rooms and we hear things.
Yep.
Where do all these things come? That's why I'm so excited to do this episode with you, and I hope this helps a lot of people. I would love to talk about misconceptions on amends and what it means to have the right motives.
Okay.
Yeah.
What does it mean to have the right motives?
So we talked about it before. I'll give you the example again, and you can give me your thoughts on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I was chatting with someone who was advised not to make an amends because after doing some questioning, she had the wrong motives.
Mm-hmm.
So the example was, so I'd asked her, I said, so like I don't know what the harm was, but I said, okay, what are your, like, what's happening here? She said, I harmed this person. I owe her the amends. I'd really love it if we could be friends again. And I said, okay, do you understand that by going and making this amend, there is a large probability you won't be friends again? Can you accept that? She's like, yeah. And I'm like, but you understand that this person deserves an amend from you. Mm-hmm. She's like, yeah. And I'm like, I fail to see where your motives are wrong in this situation. And she had said that someone had said, like, because you want something from her, your motives aren't good. Don't make that amends. And I'm like, my understanding is do the opposite. Go out and do that amends as soon as possible.
Yeah. I mean, I generally, I say assume, but when I'm working with someone and we go over these amends that they're, going forward to make, I'm assuming they're coming from a place where there's already been enough of a change as a result of the steps up to that point that major misalignment of motivations is not present. Such as, okay, you got the person with a week and they want to, some guy with a week and he wants to go, hasn't opened the big book, but he wants to go make amends to all his ex-girlfriends. It's like,
right.
Okay, in that case, well, you're not on step 9 anyway.
Yeah.
But from the sounds of it, that motivation probably is not good.
Right.
Or it's at least very misguided. But having actually written the inventory, having actually gotten to that point of, okay, we've gone through the process of taking a look at what am I making amends for? What are amends?
Yeah.
What am I trying to do here? Having the wrong motivations is possible.
Right.
But in the case of, let's say, I look at someone and think it would be nice to be friends with them again. It would be nice to have them in my life. Mm-hmm. I don't think that is a bad motive.
No.
If you're going to do it just for that purpose,
then yeah, that's all.
Then that's probably not going to work out very well.
Yeah.
But I believe going through this and getting really clear on why am I doing this amend? Like, I'm not doing this amend to check a box that I've done it. And that's something I go through with people that I work with. And, a fellow that I've worked with recently was making an amend to an ex-partner. And she asked, is this for you or is this for me? And it wasn't because he had acted inappropriately, but it was just like, she is very cautious, and she's like, why are you doing this? He's like, well, I would like to give you closure. I would like to see if there's anything I can do. I want to take accountability, and then anything that I can do to make this right and attempt to help heal whatever impacts my actions have had on you. So it is, it's a valid consideration. Because if someone, says, well, yeah, I'm doing this because my sponsor told me to do it, you may not get a very good response.
Right.
But flip side, if you're genuinely doing it because you're attempting to help this person heal and get past the impact of your actions, I believe that's a good motive. And if your sponsors kind of explain that to you and gotten clear on that, then you're probably safe.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, and it's interesting because I had this discussion with her, and she said, like, where does all this misconception stuff come from for amends? And I'm like, I can't be certain, but what makes sense to me is a couple of things. Number one, they're reteaching what they were taught. Number two, telephone game happens.
Yep.
If you're not going back to the book constantly, when you hear things, they will change a little. But for me, I think the most important that I can see reflective in my own experience in the past is that our defects are still within us. And if I'm afraid to make an amends for one specific example, I'm going to justify and rationalize all of the reasons why this is an amends I shouldn't make.
And then you're going to pass it on.
So I don't feel guilty not making it. And then I'm going to teach other people, because I can't teach other people to do those, because then I have to be accountable. No, I'm going to teach everyone that that's not one you should make.
Yep.
Because then I know that I'm okay in not making it. And it's nobody's fault. That's literally just sick people that don't know what, but that's why I love talking about this stuff. Because she's like, why is there so much? I'm like, because people apply their own shit into everything.
Yeah, absolutely.
Everything. Yeah. So I just thought it was important to mention. That's my feelings about it.
I think you're correct.
Now, my favorite one. I can't wait to hear your thoughts about this.
Okay.
Misconceptions in the room. Let's talk living amends.
Oh, boy.
Let's talk living amends.
Living amends.
Living amends. So here's my understanding of, and to be honest, I used to carry that with me my first 18 months, because that's how I was taught.
Yep.
Right. And it wasn't until I said it and somebody called me out in a loving way and said, show me where that is in the book. Then I was like, and I looked and I'm like, oh, fuck, it's not in there. Right. And I'm like, oh, that's so weird, because that's how I was taught it. Living amends, trying to, when it's inappropriate for whatever justification to not make this, I'm just going to be a better person. Well, that's not an amends. That's literally what happens when you do the steps.
That's what you're supposed to do.
That's the bare minimum here. The bare minimum. If you're doing the work, the change is happening anyways. That doesn't negate the fact that you have to go out and clear up the wreckage of your fucking past.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But the people who you stole their TV, they don't give a shit that you're not stealing TVs anymore.
They want their fucking TV back.
Yes, exactly.
Yes.
Yes.
Living amends. Not written anywhere in there.
No.
And it's such a common misconception. It's an out for people to not take accountability for their shit.
Yes, it is. It absolutely is. There is things that allude to the need for a demonstration of change. Especially when you get to the end, page 82, 83, and it talks about dealing with the family, your family. And it says things like, there is a long period of reconstruction ahead. We must take the lead. A remorseful mumbling that we're sorry won't fill the bill at all.
Yeah.
And I think some people think that going to start the amend process with, be it, a significant other, family members, whatnot, when they're a month or two sober, seems insufficient or not genuine. And I at least understand where they're coming from. This person who's dealt with you, let's say it's one of your parents. They've dealt with you your whole life. They've been putting up with your shit for a long time. They've probably heard a lot of sorries, a lot of I won't do that again.
Yep.
A lot of bullshit. And they're going to be skeptical. And I understand. They probably should be very skeptical. And so that may require a period of time before they believe you.
Right.
And so I think some people look at that and think, well, I need to make living amends so I demonstrate the change to them so that they will be convinced. And I understand the logic of that, because it probably will take them a long time before they are convinced. I don't think that says you cannot make an approach.
Right.
Because it talks about in here, and it refers to making an approach. And I think going to have the conversation with someone is not necessarily the amend. That is making the approach.
Yeah.
So when I go to someone and I say, hey,
you're asking for their time.
I'm asking for their time, and I'm going to take, I believe here's what I've done. Can you share with me what, your feedback? And then I ask them, what can I do to make this right? I had someone that I made amends to said, would you stay in contact with me? Just, shoot me an email every month or two and let me know how you're doing. Okay? That is the amend. The amend is what I'm actually doing to make it right.
Right.
The amend isn't the initial conversation.
That's the approach.
That's the approach. So, when let's say, you get out of treatment and you're going through this, you've gone through this, you are prepared to start the amends process. Let's say with your family, you're going to make this approach. They may or may not be willing to address everything or whatever. They may not be convinced of the change, but that doesn't mean I can't make the approach and start the conversation of, what would you like to see from me? What would you like to see from me that brings about change in our relationship? Now, from that point on, they might say, well, I want to see you stay sober. I want you to be happy. I want you to be a part of the family, blah, 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 whatever they may want to see. That is the amend, and that may take a lifetime. That may necessitate, years of effort, a lifetime of effort, and all of that. And that could be more along the lines of what someone considers living amends.
Right.
I am amending the relationship in the manner which I live going forward. Mm-hmm. But if I don't make the approach and have that conversation and give that person the grace to say what they need to say, or ask a question that they need to ask, or anything like that, then I am doing them a disservice.
Right. An example that's literally popping in my head right now is, and I've talked in previous episodes about how there's a lot of financial stuff with my family.
Yep.
I made the approach to make the amend. I didn't have any money.
Yeah.
I didn't have any money. But in trying to live that amend, make that amend, change that behavior, ask what they needed from me, I have not missed a payment in 4 years.
There you go. Yeah.
And I still probably have a ways to go, and I don't actually know how much more there is, right? But it was, I commit to this because I am going to be different, and this is my effort. And as I've grown in recovery and grown in my professional life, and my income has changed, so has my payments.
Of course.
Right? And as God finds me more responsible in making these amends, he's providing and putting more things in front of me, which is continuing that amends possible.
Yeah.
Right? But yeah, that just, as you explained that, that's what popped in my head.
Yeah. But no, I do think that a lot of people, the living amend thing is I don't know where it came from, but I think, as you had described earlier,
defects popping up.
Yeah, it's people who, for whatever reason, weren't willing to, or didn't think they needed to, or blah, 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 and they didn't make amends that they really needed to make. And it's a shame, because you're robbing yourself of freedom when you don't do that. You're robbing the other person of healing that they could have. You're robbing yourself of connection with God, with the breaking, the loss of potential breaking down of disconnection or connection. And yeah, I mean, this is going back to, this is God everything or nothing. If I am to make God everything in my life, then I am to put myself, they talk about like belief and faith. It's an old saying, belief is whatever. I'm trying to think of the analogy, but it involves
it's the train,
the wheelbarrow on the tightrope.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
okay.
It's believing something in that, and then faith is getting in the wheelbarrow, letting God carry you across the tightrope.
Okay.
And
I've heard a different one.
What have you heard?
I don't think I can do it any justice either. Something about like hope is seeing the light at the end of the tunnel and continuing to move forward. Faith is knowing it's not a train or something.
Yeah.
Something like that.
Yeah, something like that. Well, I mean, and that's, is God everything or nothing? Am I treating God as everything or nothing? There's going to be amends that I might put my ass in a sling making them. It's God everything or nothing. Is it worth taking the chance? Is it worth gambling on God's everything? And living amends is deciding for myself. That's saying I know better.
Yeah.
My track record on that's not great.
Not good.
No.
No. Does that sound like we've covered 9 pretty good?
I think so.
Cool.
Yeah.
Okay, before we go into step 10, I don't know about you, but I'm having lots of issues with
Yeah.
these headphones, so let's ditch them.
Okay.
There we go. Ha. That's a lot better.
Oh, that's nice.
Okay, so step 10.
Yeah.
The biggest misconception that I have heard, and I have to be careful with how I explain this for the purpose of this show not affiliating with any specific fellowship.
Sure.
There is one fellowship of all of the fellowships I have attended that does their 10 differently. And I think that's where this comes from.
Okay.
But the biggest misconception that I hear is that 10 is a nightly procedure.
Okay.
It is not.
No, not according to what I
Not
can read
according
here.
to the very short amount of very clear instructions for what step 10 is in the book.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, my experience with step 10, one, is it says at the beginning, it says, this thought brings us to step 10. The thought is finishing my amends. My experience with step 10 is that it is a moment-by-moment activity. The descriptions in here, it asked me to continue to watch. So I'm here to watch.
Which happens all day.
Which is moment by moment. You know. Then it says, when these crop up, we ask God at once. Asking is a practice. Discuss them with someone immediately, make amends quickly if we've harmed anyone, and then we turn our thoughts to someone we can help. All of these things are a description of a moment-by-moment thing that we're doing. You know, I can see fear come up in the moment if I am present, if I am awake. And as I make these amends, I am brought more and more into the present moment. So that, you know, let's say I'm about to get upset with someone, I can, whoa, see what's going on here, take a breather for a second, stop. Or, you know, maybe I've just shot my mouth off 2 seconds ago and I go, oh boy, just shot my mouth off. Take a, you know, stop. Maybe things are getting heated and I can stop them and say, hey, I was wrong to blah, blah, blah. Maybe we can put a pause on this for a minute, you know, take a breather, come back. But either way, this is a present moment activity.
Yes.
And these are practices that I can work with in the moment all the time in different ways, but it is a moment by moment thing. I do understand why someone might think that. You know, they might think any number of things. It says we continue to take personal inventory and continue to set, you know, that sounds like a written activity. But again, the specific instructions here are moment by moment. With that said, if one were to conceptually say that part of step 10 is taking periodic inventory, then I wouldn't argue that. I think that might be splitting hairs. But step 10 specifically is not, it is separate from what is described in step 11, which is a morning meditation and an evening review. Those are definite, specific instructions in step 11.
Yeah.
And step 10 is distinct from that.
Yeah.
So.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah. But I mean, all these are really, I mean, the idea of watching in your daily life, I mean, that's a pretty juicy practice. You can do a lot with that.
Yes, you can.
You can do a lot with that.
Yeah. Getting good at step 10 changed a lot for me.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I really think it's just a natural outgrowth of being present, of having been dragged into the present by all the work that we have done. And I mean, you read these things in here, and the promises in step 10 are really only things that you can experience once you've become very, say you've gotten through a good chunk of your amends, closing in on all of them. The ability to cease fighting anything or anyone. That is, I could not do that when I got here. That is an impossible ask, yeah, a lot of these things are impossible asks with an intact ego,
right?
Not being in the present.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, I mean, but I do think it's a relevant distinction.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah.
Step 11.
Step 11.
I can't really think of. The only thing that comes to mind for me is just, like we spend all this time and work doing 4 through 9, hoping to get 10 right away. Sure wasn't my experience. But with lack of 10s, lack of awareness, lack of discipline, 11s are, especially retire at night, not easy when you're not catching anything anyways. But my only real thoughts on that, and then that I've seen people fall victim to, is when they stop doing, or they don't get the 10s and the 11s. You continue to pray, but now you've completely blocked God out again, because you just did all this work to clear this path, to make this conscious contact. And if you're not keeping up with that stuff, then it's just filling up and you're pushing God further away. And so a misconception I've heard is like, how do you keep a conscious contact if you're not still working all of the time, right? You're praying, but you're not going to get very much back in meditation if you've blocked God out. That's the only thing that for me that comes to mind with 11.
I mean, I would say, based on my experience, the biggest misconception with the specific instructions of step 11 is that you need to do them.
What do you mean?
Well, if you had truth serum and you were to administer it to 100 people in a given 12-step fellowship.
Okay.
I think you see where I'm going here.
Keep going, though.
I would not be surprised if the numbers of people engaging in regular step 11 practice were sub 20%.
I think that's pretty accurate.
Yep. And, some of us, based on the circles we spend time in, may be blessed to be surrounded with many people who are regularly engaging in these practices.
Right.
But my experience is that is not common elsewhere. And that's the misconception. It's an easy thing. Like, let's get real. Let's say you have nobody in your life who asks you specifically, what are you doing with step 11? Well, if you don't do it and no one asks you about it, it's not like you have a scarlet letter on you because you didn't meditate this morning.
Right.
And if your whole group doesn't do it, no one's stressing it. Maybe you do it for a little while, but then you miss a few days and you go, oh, I'm fine.
I feel like that's really relatable to 9s too.
Yep.
Yep.
Yep. And I think that's probably why I'm so adamant about 9s and step 11.
Right.
Step 11 for me is a radically apparent thing when people are not doing it.
Okay.
It's very simple.
Okay.
I with people that I work with, one of my favorite questions is, how was your morning meditation? Because if someone calls me and they start, puking into the phone, no, hi, how are you? Just, about whatever, about her or him or them or whatever, this circumstance.
Right.
Whenever they run out of steam, I will ask them, "How was your morning meditation today?" And very regularly,
They say they didn't do it.
probably haven't done it for a while.
Right.
Um,
Interesting.
there's a distinct correlation there.
Interesting.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
You know, usually when I'm asking that question, I'm not asking it because I'm actually wondering how their meditation was. I'm asking because I know they didn't do it.
They didn't do it.
They
Yeah.
definitely didn't do it.
Well,
And it's
if they kept their conscious contact, they probably
Yeah.
wouldn't be so angry.
No, exactly.
Yeah.
They would not be, running in that manner. Step 11, I mean, a regular meditation practice, I believe, is the most it may be the single most powerful tool that we will ever work with in here. Another misconception, people talk about 10 and 11 and sometimes 10, 11, 12 as the maintenance steps. I have heard that
I've
term.
heard that many times.
I have heard that thrown around. And I don't know where that comes from. I guess I can see some logical reason why someone would think of it in that way, in that it is something you need to do on a regular basis. But the idea that simply what is occurring is maintenance, I think, sells these steps dramatically short.
I'm trying to think. Is the sentence in the book depending on the maintenance of our spiritual condition?
Yes, it
maybe
is.
Maybe that's where it was pulled from.
Okay, yeah. And I actually, that kind of popped in my head, but I just
Yeah.
contingent on the maintenance. It's right here in step 10. Thank you. Okay, so I mean,
But I agree with what you're saying, right? Because I don't believe they are like to consider all three. Right? That maintenance of your spiritual condition and maintenance steps, they're very different things, right?
Yeah.
Your goal is to become better every day. It is
Yeah.
a growth process. You're not trying to maintain where you were.
Yep.
You're trying to go beyond that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree with you.
Yeah. And so, I mean, I look in my own experience, how I've experienced life, and a regular meditation practice has probably had more of an effect on me and how I engage with life than anything else.
Right.
The idea it describes in here, to pause when agitated or doubtful.
Yeah.
The ability to pause, I feel like, is not exclusively, but almost entirely an outgrowth of a meditation practice.
I agree with that. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
I believe that.
Yep.
I'm open to being wrong, but
Something that just popped in my head, and this is what I struggled with for a long time. The misconception about what meditation is. Right? I cannot.
Oh.
I have tried, and I am willing to continually try. I haven't in a while, and maybe this is coming up because maybe I should again. But for me, I struggle with a closed eye, silent, clear your mind, be present meditation. I struggle with that. I struggle with that, and it kept me away from meditation for a really long time because I was always told in the rooms that's what meditation is.
Okay.
Right. So I've had an opportunity to try out a bunch of different things, right? There's meditation apps that have like body scans or 5 senses or just finding a way to be present, right? What's really been the thing for me, I can't sit quietly on my couch in peaceful presentness, but when I get into nature, when I touch the earth, I can sit and feel the sun and sit and really get into a great meditation very easily. For me, nature, creator, being around that, touching the earth, not a problem, right? But it took me a long time to be able to find things like that. But like I don't like. I guess for me, I understand the difference because I can actually feel the energy from the earth when I touch it, and I can feel the creator and the nearness. But I struggle hard with sitting on a couch, closing my eyes, and clearing my mind. Right, trying to be present, trying to do that stuff. My hamster just like, as soon as I try to empty my brain, my hamster starts running harder, right? So for me, I had to try many different things to find. I remember somebody once said like, listening to music is my meditation. And I was like, I'll try it. I love music and I listen to music all the time. And for a while, I'm like, oh, I need music to meditate. But I wasn't actually meditating, right?
No.
The song makes me think of experiences in my life, makes me feel a certain way, brings up like it's not the same thing. It is absolutely
it's
not the
not.
same thing. But I think it's important, the distinction that there are lots of ways to connect with God and to be present and to make that practice. The classic doesn't have to be the way. And for me, I struggled with that. But when I get into nature, like 5 minutes on my couch feels like 5 hours. But if I do it sitting on the grass out in the sun, 20 minutes feels like 3.
That's fair.
Yeah.
I mean, I do think that I'm not the first person I've heard that from. I think part of that, and I look at my own experience, the initial experience I think everyone has with a meditation practice is the first thing you experience is just how much chatter there is.
Yeah.
And now I think some people look at that and say, okay, well, that means I'm not doing this right. I believe that means you are doing it right.
Okay.
That the first thing I need to be aware of is that my mind is, it's a I've heard people refer it as the chatter of 1,000 monkeys.
Yeah.
Yeah. Entirely, much like a whole bunch of monkeys, there's probably a lot of shit getting thrown around and it's just very chaotic.
Yep.
And that is the first thing that I observe when I start to try to practice that. I'm not a meditation teacher and I don't pretend to be, but I do have a fair bit of experience with it. And I think I don't insist on people meditating a certain way, but I do think it has to be intentional. I do think that having a practice which involves focusing on my breath, the breath is actually the only way to seemingly connect the unconscious with the conscious.
That makes sense. Yep.
I'm not a neuroscientist, but I have read things in neuroscience around the sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system, and the only way that you can bridge the gap between those two things is with breathing practices.
Interesting.
Yeah.
See, and it's funny because sitting on a couch, the only way that I can is by counting my breath and focusing on slowing that and controlling. That's interesting. I didn't know that. That's the only way that I can meditate inside.
That's meditation.
It's amazing.
That's literally it. I've read a couple really interesting books. One, I read a book on, it was about training that was given to people in SWAT teams and in the military who literally engage in actual lethal combat. And one of the things that they work with around dealing with trauma is box breathing, which is basically meditation.
Okay.
It's basically, call it circular breathing, but basically a controlled, focused breathing exercise. And practicing that on a regular basis.
Interesting.
This is the thing, and you say it's very hard, and I struggle with it. And what my mind says is it's like going to the gym.
Yeah.
It's like, okay, I'm flabby and out of shape, and I go to the gym, and it's uncomfortable, and I feel maybe I'm self-conscious, I feel whatever, and it's hard. I'm sweaty, I'm out of breath. It's not a good scene.
You need practice.
It doesn't look good.
Yeah.
But does that mean I therefore do not do it? And so
Right.
I push people to say, hey, let's try this. And also, the more you put into that, my experience is A, the easier it gets.
Yep.
And B, the more automatic it becomes in my life.
Right.
It's exactly the kind of practice like we're talking about in here of continuing to watch. The first thing I'm going to see when I continue to watch is how dramatically asleep I am. It's like, okay, I'm here to watch. And then I realize I did something 7 hours after the fact. It's like, wow, okay, I missed her.
You know what's so funny? I didn't even make that connection. Talking about being able, if you are making these practices when you're able to pause, right?
Yeah.
When you're able to respond and not react. I didn't even think about this. That's kind of cool. When things happen that get me riled up, I have to stop and I have to close my eyes and I pray, and then I have to sit and I have to breathe. I didn't even realize I was meditating.
Yeah. Now imagine this. Now imagine you effectively every day practice engage with these breathing practices in the morning.
Yep.
Could you see how doing that you then may come to a point where, let's say, something happens through your day, and before you even have to consciously think about it,
You just do it.
you just
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
you're already in that place, and you're just
didn't
right
even
back
realize
into
it. Yeah. Cool. Because you know what's really interesting is I openly tell people that I suck at step 11. At least at least like with that part and with the physically writing things down, right? I don't need truth serum to say that I need more discipline and more work on that. But I thought it was a lot worse than it is. Because it turns out I'm actually doing it a lot more than I thought I was.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah.
Cool.
Yeah. And I mean, it's we talk about meditation, and it's unlike writing inventory, it's something that's much harder to find experience and expertise on in the rooms.
Yeah.
And I encourage people to go, it's like, if you can find someone who's been meditating every day for 30 years, like, talk to them about it.
Yeah.
Although I've been meditating every day for a really long time, so I do have some things to say about it.
Right.
And yeah.
Awesome.
Although, I mean, if you go through here and you go through the history of this, there's a lot of different ways that people meditate.
Right.
And I don't know that one is necessarily more valid than the other. My experience with step 11 is not that people are doing it wrong. It's that they're not doing it at all.
Ah.
That's the real problem.
Okay. That makes sense.
Yeah. And so, back to the original thing, the misconception around step 11 is that you need to do it.
Right.
Thinking about step 1 and the particulars of step 1, if I believe that I lack the power of choice, if that is the truth about me, and my life literally depends upon the grace of and a relationship with God, then anything that I can do to strengthen that relationship that I am not doing
Right.
is one thing of me saying I don't really lack the power of choice.
Right.
It is a contrary to the essential nature of this, because the essential nature of my alcoholism is like, without God, I'm dead.
Right.
And so, does that mean at some point in the future I get to pick and choose what I do to get closer to God, to break down the illusion of separation?
Yeah.
And I mean, step 11 is, again, it's the thing that nobody really sees you do. No one's generally bugging you about it, unless you're around me. And I'll bug you about it a lot. But, it's one of those things, and many people are not doing it, therefore they're even less inclined to bug you about it.
Right.
But yeah. Okay.
Thanks for that.
You're welcome.
I appreciate that.
Yeah.
Step 12.
Step 12. Oh.
Step 12. Misconceptions.
What are misconceptions about step 12?
I can think of a few things, but if I'm being perfectly honest, I'm now wondering if, the things that I'm thinking aren't even in the book. So,
Like what?
What a sponsor is, what a sponsor isn't.
Okay.
Right? What the expectation. I mean, it does talk you occasionally you will have to meet these conditions, and there are some kind of guidelines and stuff. But the biggest, so I guess I'll just say it loosely, right? Because maybe I'm wrong. Because now that I'm thinking about it, it's not in the book.
Do you even know where the term sponsor comes from?
No,
Okay.
I do not.
It actually comes from the Oxford groups.
Okay,
The Oxford group.
Yeah.
You couldn't walk into an Oxford group meeting.
you had to be sponsored.
You had to be sponsored by someone, had to vouch for you that you were allowed to come into the Oxford group prayer meeting.
Okay, that makes a lot more sense.
Yeah.
Cool. I mean, I'm not surprised.
Yeah.
Since everything else came from there too.
Yeah, exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
So you couldn't just stroll in. Someone had to bring you in.
Or
Interesting.
in a lot of cases, early in AA history, there's a lot of people who were in like asylums.
Right.
So if you wanted to get out of the asylum, often someone had to sponsor you, to vouch for you to get out of there, to make sure this guy's not going to go run amok.
Oh, so that's what happened with Ebby, is they literally vouched for him, and that's why the court system didn't.
They sponsored him out of, being
because I talk
committed.
about it and I read. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, that makes so much sense.
Yep.
Okay. Because I was going to say, I'm like, I do find it interesting that the word sponsor is not actually in the book either.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it's known as a sponsor.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm trying to remember what I was going to say now. Oh, yeah. So, like, the thing that I hear and I come into contact with the most often is somebody believing to their core that their sponsor is essentially going to be their on-earth God for them. And just understanding what role a sponsor is supposed to play in your life. But again, as I'm talking about these misconceptions, as I now understand them, this stuff isn't in that chapter. But, like my understanding from what we hear in the rooms is that a sponsor is someone who's had a spiritual awakening and somebody who's gone through the book with someone else and who has learned the steps. And my role is to take you through that. That is all.
Yeah. I mean, if you look in the chapter Working with Others, they describe a relationship and they do use words. They will refer to this new person as a prospect.
Prospect, yep.
Okay, that's one. They also use the term protege. And so what, this protege mentor relationship is, again, that's kind of alluded to. Okay,
right.
So what does that relationship look like? It looks like someone who looks out for someone, who gives someone guidance.
Right.
But they're not their master. It's not like that. It's not like I have some level of control. Right. I've had people who've acted like mentors to me and given me really good advice and suggested ways I might go about things.
They're also not parents.
No, they're not parents. They're not
parents.
No.
I'm not going to give you consequences, and I'm not going to put limitations. I'm not going to do any of that stuff.
Of course. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
So, it describes these kind of things, and I think it describes a relationship. It describes how two people might work together in some way in here, but I do think that some people will assign ideas to that based on their own conception of relationships.
Right.
I think I've used this around step 2 and whatnot of the idea that we turn God into people and people into gods. And I think that applies.
I like that.
Yeah. Because, hey, I got this angry, vengeful God, and it's like, well, I'm angry and vengeful. So why wouldn't I think God would,
Yeah.
I'm applying these ideas, versus this person. I think they've got their stuff together. They're going to solve all my problems. They're basically like a higher power. I call them whenever anything happens and they'll tell me what to do, and personally, I don't want to be responsible for what my sponsees do. So dear God.
Oh, 100%. And we had that discussion too, right? Like I just went through my first experience of somebody really projecting their belief system onto me and the fallout that happened because of that, because she put me on this pedestal and these expectations were set. And it was interesting because I saw bits and pieces, which is why I specifically set an expectation that I would be unavailable for a specific day, which normally I wouldn't do because I shouldn't have to do that.
No.
But I was trying to work with this, and I set the specific expectation, and then it didn't, all the blame for her failure was then put on me for not answering my phone and all these things. And it's just, that was unfortunate. It was really the first time that I saw a huge downside of how negatively those kind of belief systems, if you're stuck in that stuff and don't really get to the root of it while you're going through your steps, can impact that projection out onto other people.
Yeah.
Yeah, that one was hard.
And then as well, I mean, I think there are people who act as sponsors who are genuinely confused about how they relate to the world, as in that they are not God, you know? And there may be many reasons for that.
Yep.
But I mean, if I think that I have a place, I don't know, editing your amends list, let's say, I think I'm God. You know, if I'm going to tell you what to do, you know, or how to conduct yourself in relationships or whatever, I mean, I don't think I'm a sponsor. I think I'm God.
Right.
You know, and that's a reflection of my own work that I would need to do if I were doing that. But that is a reality. Many people do engage with that. And
I remember the first time that I had a fallout with a sponsee, too long to get into, but I had a lot of lessons to learn. I won't say they were mistakes because I didn't know I was making them until I went through this process. I had a lesson to learn there.
Yep.
A lot of guilt. Felt really bad, and I had reached out to to a pillar, and I remember being like, "Do you have time? I'm freaking out. Oh my god!" I started to cry, and the first thing that I said was, "I've just wrecked this girl. Like I ruined this girl, and I don't know what to do now. Like I've wrecked everything, and I've ruined this girl." And he said exactly what I needed to hear. And I remember I could hear him smiling through the phone. He said, "It's interesting, Jen, that you think you're that powerful." And I was like, I needed to hear that knife to my ego. Right.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh my God, I'm actually not. Oh my God, this has nothing to do with me. Oh my gosh. Okay, cool. Right. Like her ability to find God has nothing to do with me.
Yeah.
Right. And I haven't destroyed her.
No.
Right. But I also remember what it was like to be new and get through and be like all gung ho on sponsoring and being like, oh my God, like I'm just going to help everybody. I'm going to fix everybody. Right.
Yep. Yeah. And I mean, I think a lot of this runs on that.
Yeah.
I mean, you know, you got to get in, you know, you have to be enthusiastic. And,
Right.
and I think if you genuinely do this and have this experience, it's inevitable. You will be enthusiastic. And of course, it says in here, we're going to, you know, like we're going to make mistakes here. We're not always going to do this right. And good sponsorship, strong fellowship around you, as much guidance as you possibly can get is all going to help. But yeah, I mean, that's...
Right.
Yeah.
So here's the biggest misconception that I know,
Okay.
that I hear constantly. We talked about it. I talked about it with a sponsee today.
Okay.
How long to wait after reading step 12 before you take on a sponsee? How long do you wait? How many times have I heard in the room, I'm going to wait a year. I'm going to focus on my steps and my relationship with God. I've had people that I've listened to talk about how they spend like 5, like, what is the time frame? Same thing as 3 to 4. Like how long do you wait? You don't wait. You go find someone and you give away what was so freely given to you. I remember, so one of my sponsees, I have a relationship with her mother as well. And so she got through the 12. And then I said, "Okay, fly birdie, go get somebody. Start reading with someone else." And so her mom was quite concerned and she approached me and she said, "I really don't think she's ready for that." And I said, "I disagree. I think she's entirely ready for that." She's like, "Well, why is she ready?" I'm like, "Because we just finished 12. That's why." And she's like, but like she was very concerned that her daughter would relapse because she wasn't ready. And so I had to politely explain. I'm like, "Hey, by the way, she probably picked up 10% of what each step really means while going through it with me the first time. Every time she reads the book with someone else, she in turn is redoing her steps and learning what she missed and reapplying and having to now be accountable because now she can't ask someone to do something without her doing it too. Her steps are going to get better every time she works with someone else."
Yep.
And her mom, understanding that now, went from to get your ass, go out there, go find a sponsee right away.
Yeah.
Right. And it's the people that pick up someone else to help immediately and do that consistently that really catapult into that next level of recovery. Absolutely. Right. I remember I was taking my 4 years. I think it was just a few months ago. It could have been my 3. It doesn't matter. At a specific fellowship that I don't go to often, but I like to dip my toes in every now and again. And I remember someone saying, they're just like, I haven't made the decision to start sponsoring yet. And I'm really focusing on and just like, they really thought they were doing the right thing. I got to get disciplined. I got to more focus on this. I got to do that. And I got to do this. And I was just like, oh my God, no, like go find someone now. Right. Because of my lack of awareness and my ability to be disciplined with other steps, because I didn't know enough about them, right? Like single-handedly for me, I only think I stayed sober in year 2 and 3 because I was constantly working with others.
Yeah.
There was never a time I wasn't working with at least one person.
Yeah.
So like the book says, when all other measures fail, working with another alcoholic will save the day.
Yeah.
And that was my experience. So if you need to know how long to wait, don't wait. Just go get somebody.
Oh, absolutely.
Sit down, read the book.
I mean, I know for myself, if I am working with someone and they end up in a circumstance like I'm working with someone recently and they're, whatever, a month and a half, and someone said, hey, I relate to you. Would you be willing to help me with this? And they asked me, what do I think about that? And I said, you can show them everything up until what you've done so far. We've been through, you've compared this to your experience, you've gone through 1, 2, and 3, inventory, finished your inventory. So it's like, you can get them this far. We hadn't even gotten to going through the chapter working with others yet.
Okay.
Now, would I encourage someone to, before we've gotten to the chapter working with others, to just immediately start doing it? No, I wouldn't push them at that point.
Right.
My only caveat around any of that, and I think this is incumbent on good sponsorship.
Okay.
Is the only problem I have seen with step 12 is that people will use step 12 to avoid step 9.
Ah.
I don't have time to make amends. I've got 5 sponsees. All I do is work with others now. And that's, how many amends have you made? Not all of them. Well,
how could you possibly have time to work on your own steps and strength of relationship with God if all you're doing is emptying your cup on other people? But again, that's something that each person has to go through and has to learn, right? That's an experience that God's going to help provide. That's step 7 right there.
Yeah. But it is, if you have a sponsor who's aware of this,
right,
who knows people's propensity to do the thing that's easier, because realistically, working with a bunch of people's easier than making amends.
It is.
It's less uncomfortable. It's, I feel so great and I'm this important, blah, 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 whatever. My ego can play on that a lot. Instead of making amends, it'll do that. And so having someone in your life, or people in your life who are aware of that, to say, okay, well, that's fine. I'm cool with you working with people, but it cannot take precedence over the fact that you're making amends. You need to get those done. You need to make progress on that. That's one thing. And then, the other thing in step 12 is there's 3 parts to step 12.
That's exactly where my brain was just going to the next part.
Sponsorship.
Yep.
When we talk about step 12, and that's very important, very important part of that whole thing. But it says, having had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps.
Yep.
So if I have not had a spiritual awakening as the result of the steps, because I haven't done all the steps, i.e.
because you did 3 amends.
Exactly. I did steps 1 through 8 and a quarter.
Yep. Yeah.
Then it's very hard to
give that to others.
Yeah.
You don't even have it yourself.
I'm here to transmit a spiritual awakening. And if I haven't really had it, I'm going to be of limited effectiveness.
Right.
And then it says, carry this message to others.
Yep.
And practice these principles in all of our affairs. And I think the practicing these principles in all of our affairs is something that is not taught very often. I would say, look at the principles that we find in here. Loving compassion.
Right.
Fellowship, community.
Forgiveness, integrity,
willingness, integrity,
honesty.
Absolutely. Humility, all of these things.
Yeah.
So I am to practice these principles in all of my affairs. Now, when I get here, I don't have very many affairs. you know?
Yep.
I don't have a lot going on,
Yeah.
you know? But I think what this says is that I am to resume a vital part of my community. I am to create community. Because, now let's say the only community I have is going to meetings.
Mm-hmm.
That's very limited.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm limited in who I can help.
Yep.
So how do I take these principles and apply them in every area of my life? And I believe that is possible. You know, can I apply them in intimate relationships or family relationships? Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Can I apply them in business?
Of course.
I can.
Yeah.
You know, can I take the value that I have learned about community and say, I'm going to use something or find something in my life to create additional community? Because I you know, this is just a personal opinion, but I believe that community, effective community, and a sense of belonging are dramatically lacking
Yep.
for many people these days.
I agree.
And so can I take everything that I have learned, and I learn a lot. I mean, we learn a lot in here. You know, we get the chance to do things that people don't in other parts of their lives. Like I remember when I was, 4 years sober, I chaired the young people's, it was the Mickey Paws, the Maritime Conference of Young People in AA.
Okay.
Okay. And literally, it was just because I was the youngest person with the most recovery.
Okay.
And so everyone's like,
Okay.
well, I guess you're going to be the chair. You know, everyone's like, yeah. You know, and the people were there to help and all that. But like, I had to throw an event for a couple hundred people and do it on a shoestring budget.
Yep.
You know? And we did, and we had a great time. We had so much fun and all this kind of stuff. I mean, you talk to people outside of this, very few people have done things like that.
Mm-hmm.
But for me, it's like, okay, well, I can create an event. Of course I can create a big event. You know, an event for 60 people? Yeah, no problem. Here's how I would do it. Easy. Here's how I promote it. Blah, blah, blah. Done. And I can create all different types of community. I can participate effectively in all kinds of things like that. And, you know, I talk about that because that's just something I have done and is valuable to me. But, I mean, everybody can apply that in their own way.
Yeah.
However they want to, whatever that looks like. But the point is I need to go out there and do it.
Yeah.
You know, I need to do it. And if I don't, does it mean I'm going to relapse? No, I don't think so. But will my life be all it can be?
Probably not.
Probably not. Because again, everything is connected and I don't know how. So the things that I do to promote community in different ways may then bring about all kinds of other things in my life. You know, I'm fresh off dealing with something. I participate in Twitter. I love, you know, there's actually a very strong oil and gas community on Twitter, and so I've got to know lots of people from there. Yeah. I have a guy that I met, you know, we were on Twitter Spaces, you know, shit talking basically, and we just chatted and got to know each other. And I've watched him circle the drain for 2 years, and he finally 3 weeks ago, you know, kind of we talked, and he's like, yeah, you know, we talked about alcoholism and the description of it, and he went to a meeting and he wasn't sure. It was so great, you know, and then he gets silver chip and whatever, and he gets a big book, doesn't read it.
Of course not.
Does not read it, you know? And I'm like, okay, check one. That's a good sign.
Yeah.
You sound like you might qualify here, buddy.
Sounds like you're one of us.
And then he's still not sure, and
Yep.
he goes on a bender, and he goes to a friend's wedding, and he's blackout the whole time, and everyone's mad at him, and he doesn't know why. And then he's calling me on his way back, still drunk in the airport, you know, I need to do this. And he comes back and he's been to like a bunch of meetings now, and he's got someone lined up to be a sponsor and all this kind of stuff. Now, if I did not participate in that community in the way that I, you know, have been taught, I would never been able to be useful to that person.
Right.
Who knows what would happen to him?
Right.
Maybe he wouldn't even know what his problem is.
Mm-hmm.
I'm asked to be a part of a community because otherwise I'm not of maximum usefulness. I think that's all part of step 12.
Yeah.
It's all part of step 12. It's showing up for life.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Being of service in all areas. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Agreed.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Yeah. Any other misconceptions? We got fellowship misconceptions. We got
So there's two that I'm aware of, but again, I can only say that they're super popular. Well, I mean, so this one's super popular.
okay.
As far as I know, it never came out of any literature from the
Okay.
history. 90 meetings in 90 days.
Okay.
90 meetings in 90.
yep,
You got to
yep.
go to 90 meetings in 90 days.
Okay.
I don't know of it being in the literature
It's not.
anywhere.
It's not.
It sounds like a treatment center thing to me,
Yep.
but I will throw my opinion
Okay.
on it
Yeah.
just because someone told me their opinion on
Okay.
it. And I'm like, I like that.
Okay.
And I use it against people often.
You use it against
Sorry,
them.
that sounds off. That sounds awful. I'm an addict. Okay, I still got
No,
stuff
hey,
to
I
learn.
know, I'm just-
I use it against them. Yeah, no. 90 meetings in 90 days. I don't like that. I don't like that because, as my experience shows, I am an all or nothing person, and I feel like a lot of us are.
Yeah.
Very high end of the spectrum to the very low end of the spectrum. If I get strep throat or I get like super, super sick and I literally cannot get to a meeting one day, why bother going to any more? I missed one. I was told to do 90 and 90. I missed one. So it doesn't count. There's no point. Might as well just give the fuck up.
Makes sense.
What was explained to me was beneficial for them and said it's found nowhere in the literature. Don't know where that came from. Here's what I do. I go to as many meetings as possible in my first 1 to 2 years.
Yeah.
That's it. That's all you got to do. Go to as many meetings as possible, but make sure you're not just going to meetings. Make sure you get a sponsor to do the work. I think that was
Yeah.
it.
I spent a time as a big book opinion zealot.
Okay.
Oh my. Yep. And the 90 and 90 thing,
Yep.
I had a lot of opinions on.
Okay.
And I absolutely is not in any literature. It probably did come from a treatment center somewhere.
Yeah.
Probably. Well intentioned.
Right.
And I think the spirit behind it of, hey, if you're really new, you should probably invest a lot in this community and being
Right.
a part of,
Yeah.
I think is absolutely the right spirit. Now, putting an arbitrary number on it may be helpful for some people. I think, as with many things, if we explained to someone who was new, hey, here's why we're suggesting this. You know, if somebody said, hey, you should go to 90 meetings in 90 days
Because
because we want you to come here regularly, to get to know us, let us get to know you a bit, spend time with us, and hopefully in this period of time, by spending enough time with us, you will start to feel a part of. Even leaving aside all of the other, very important things, like you ought to find someone to work the steps with, and
Yep.
you ought, all of that, and getting to work in that manner. Even just, at one time in my zealotry, I was sort of all steps and nothing but, and meetings aren't in the big book, and this and that, and they barely are. They allude to them and describe them a little bit, but regular attendance of meetings, as we know today, was not a feature of the original fellowship. It was not a feature of the original program.
the only line I can think of, and that's where I actually want to go to my next misconception, in Bill's story. We meet frequently so
Yep.
that newcomers may
Yep.
find the fellowship that they seek.
And I believe in A Vision for You, it talks about informal meetings.
Yep.
And all this kind of stuff.
But yes, continue.
Where was I? Oh yeah, I was zealous
Right.
about, it's all steps and nothing but.
Right.
And I have realized the wisdom of some of the colloquial stuff in the fellowship. And there is a distinct power in the fellowship. And I think most people experience that. They come here, and if they really feel that they belong, that is a powerful experience. Like, wow, I'm coming to a room full of people that I identify with.
Right.
When I have often not identified with anyone.
Yeah.
And I feel a part of.
Yeah.
That's a very powerful thing.
Oh, yeah.
Very powerful. I don't think it is a coincidence that you do see people who, for better or for worse, find themselves staying abstinent for long periods of time just going to meetings.
And that's the next misconception, is
Yeah.
that going to meetings will give you a spiritual awakening. And
Yeah.
you're not having a good time? How many meetings a week do you go to? That has nothing to do with the one-on-one internal work that you'll find working with someone on the book.
It is two different things. I guess it is one question that I ask, though, because I have witnessed this, and it is, depending on where you're familiar with, it can be shocking, but I have been, I got sober in AA in Halifax. You couldn't hit a recovered person with a dead cat. You know what I mean? Like, they didn't exist.
Okay.
You go to a meeting, there was no big books in that meeting.
Oh.
Oh, no. Oh, no. No. Oh, I'm serious.
So what was in the room?
People talking about their childhood.
Oh. Ooh.
People talking about their day. People talking about how they felt. Yeah, I know. That's
How did you stick around long enough to find out that? And Harry, here's a great sidebar misconception for anybody who doesn't come to these groups now.
Yeah.
Going to one meeting of one group one time, please don't take that to be what the groups are about.
Yeah. Yeah.
Go
Absolutely.
to several of different kinds of different times, because some meetings have recovered people and some meetings don't.
And it so it heavily depends on where you are.
How
So
did you get through that long enough to get the miracle?
second meeting I was at in Halifax, I met this guy, and he was old enough to be my dad, but he was like very energetic, and he's smiling, and he was like really positive, and I'd see him at all these meetings, because like when I went to a treatment center, and I got out, and I had seen enough in the period of time that I was there that I'm like, I really need to do this. Like, I need to do this. I'm going to do this. And so I went to a meeting every day, sometimes twice a day. And like, I went back to work right away, but I mean, I went to a meeting every night, and then 2 on Saturday and 2 on Sunday and whatever. And this guy was always there. And one day he showed up with someone else, and they were like, hey, it was a Saturday morning meeting. I remember where it was. And they said, hey, let's go grab a coffee. I was like, okay, yeah, sure. I'm not doing anything else. Sure. Let's go grab a coffee. And they sit down, and they're like, hey, you're here all the time. Do you want to, we meet every week, and we kind of go through the big book, and do you want to come and do that with us? And I was like, yeah, let's do that. Yeah, awesome. And they're like, it's Tuesday evening over at so-and-so's house. I'm like, okay, yeah, just give me the address and I'll be there. And I went there, and that was how I met my first sponsor, and that was how I was introduced to really the steps.
Cool.
Absent that, I would probably be dead.
Yeah.
So all of this to say, we're back to what we were talking about, is there are places where there's nothing but fellowship. Mm-hmm. And there are actually places where there is nothing but program. And they are both really dysfunctional.
Right.
And there is a necessity for understanding the importance of the fellowship and the importance of the program, and
the
how these
balance
two
of
things
both.
work together.
Yeah.
And that,
I like that.
in the traditions, it says personal recovery depends upon group unity. That is true.
Yes.
Is absolutely true. Because if you have a disunified fellowship, you will not see maximum effectiveness.
Right.
And I think Calgary CA is very fortunate.
Yeah.
In that they have a very, very good balance of, unity and a sense of fellowship and togetherness, and stressing the importance of the program.
Yeah.
While at the same time not, I've been to places where people are stressing the importance of the program, but also using it as like a weapon about their superiority over another fellowship or something like that.
Right.
And that's dangerous. It's dangerous and unhealthy. But all of this to say, if I'm working with someone, like someone new comes and says, hey, I'd like you to work with me, and they've got some time, I want to sit down and figure out where they're at. And one of my questions is like, do you have a home group? Do you go to it every week? Do you participate in this fellowship? Do you have some form of contact on a daily basis with someone else who's doing this? Mm-hmm. Doesn't mean you have to go to a meeting every day.
Right.
Could be a 5-minute phone conversation. It could be someone you're friends with. who's also in the fellowship, who's also in the, doing the deal.
Yeah.
All of that. Do I have all of these things? Because there's a merit to all of that, a distinct merit. And I didn't understand how important it was for a really long time. Humans are communal animals.
Oh, yeah.
We live on community.
Yep.
I think there's an evolutionary reason why people are so afraid of what other people think of them and not being accepted. Because you go back in time, if you were driven out of your community, it was a death sentence.
Yeah.
You were driven out of your tribe, your small group.
Exiled, you're screwed.
You're going to die.
Yeah.
And so it makes sense why people would be afraid of that. And, and it's really meaningful, and community is really important, and we're lucky that we have what we have.
Yeah.
And I just encourage people to treat it with the importance that I think it deserves. But at the same time, it doesn't supersede the need to do the program, to do the steps,
right,
and all of that. It's all one thing together.
Right.
It all reinforces each other and works together.
3 sides of a triangle that have to work together.
Yeah. Equilateral triangle.
Love that.
Yeah.
Amazing.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have.
Yeah?
Yeah. I don't have anything else that have notes on or that I can think of. We've covered a lot.
We have covered. How long has it been?
About 2.5 hours.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
Oh, cool. Nice.
This is going to make a very good long episode. This is the longest to date.
Awesome.
Yeah. Our last one that we did was an hour 45.
Okay.
Not you and I. Sorry.
Yeah.
The last one on working the 12 steps that I had. Chris come on for that one.
Nice.
Yeah. But I think there's a lot of good stuff here.
Yeah.
I really appreciate you coming. Thank you.
Well, thank you for having me. This is fun.
I'm glad that we had a chance to do it too.
Yeah.
You got some life changes coming up, so I really appreciate you making time for this.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
I think this is going to be a good one.
Yeah.
Yeah. Awesome.
Awesome.
Thanks, man.
You're welcome.
I appreciate you.
I appreciate you too.
Cool. Make sure you come visit us so you can do another episode.
I will. I promise.
Okay. Sweet. Thanks.
You're welcome.
All right, guys. Peace.